Now, what is wrong in setting dates? This is where the problem happens. Ideally, we will go to the start and finish date of your plan, and you will use the drop down or directly change the date. When you start changing the start date or the finish date of an activity, what project assumes is you don't want that task to start or finish any date earlier than the typed date. In the sense, on your screens you can find I'm selecting, let's say, 28th of May 2012, which means I don't want this activity to start before 28th of May, which means that even if its earlier activity is completing on the earlier month or the earlier week, this activity will not move ahead. Okay, so that's the problem in setting constraints. But now let's get into the details. What are the ways and how does it affect your schedule? So I'm just going back to my project plan. Okay, so we are back to the same project plan where we have identified the critical path. Now, I'm just changing my table back to the entry table. Okay, so let me give some time for the screen to be refreshed. Yeah, I hope all of you can see it. Fine. So I'm just going to pick this activity, which is T2. Okay, you can see there is an activity T2, what I have just highlighted. So I'm just going to change the date of that particular task alone. Okay. Now let's see what happens. I'm going to T2. Now currently this activity is scheduled on 3rd of May 2013. As you know, I've configured Saturday and Sunday also as a working day. I'm just moving this date 2 days late, which is 5th of May. Now just observe what happens in project, okay? So whenever you start changing the date, project doesn't like it. It says you are trying to move this activity to a future date, and it gives you 3 options. Number 1, move this task to the selected date and remove its predecessor link because T2 has been linked to T1. Number 2, move this task to the future date, but please respect the dependency. The third one, don't move this task, just ignore the last option what I made. So I'll go for the second option here, and I'll just say OK. Now closely observe what happens to your project plan. So you can see that the selected date 4th of May has been set, and accordingly the finish date is getting moved. On the other side, you can observe this activity has been moved to a later date. So it looks good, right? But what happens now is for this activity, there is a constraint that has been put. If you observe on the extreme left, there is a small calendar indicator that has been displayed that this task has a start no earlier than on the selected date, which means even if T1 completes on an earlier date, T2 is not taking advantage of it. So without knowing what constraints are, people fall into a trap of changing dates either in the start date or finish date, which I will say, which is not good from a scheduling aspect. Okay. Now I'm going back to my presentation. So when we talk about constraints, right, there are 3 types of constraints. There are 3 categories